I'm going to remember that from now on.
Please do. Because how many times do you, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do. You guys, this is what's going to happen. But if you can get people acclimated to, okay, I see a problem. I want to fix this. Here's my idea.
They're
And then,
automatically in that change bus with you.
exactly. And sometimes I led a call center of about 150 people, and we needed to implement a change management process. So I see if there's anybody who is interested. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 individuals. And I said, look, you know, the call center, your supervisors or individual contributors, why don't you think about how we can better manage change? Here's some resources for you. Take 2 weeks, come back to me, and let's talk about it. They came back with this awesome plan. It was better than I could have done. And I actually had responsibility for change management in a prior role. But, you know, you give people that opportunity to do something like that and really own it. And yes, there's a factor of if they're doing it for the boss, that will motivate people because they want to show what they can do. And to give that opportunity, that's huge.
You get that opportunity by showing up also with your part of the bargain there versus
Correct.
Folks, especially if you're early in your career, better habits. What do you think is one or a couple of underrated but very powerful habits that people can start practicing even now, this week, to start building up a leadership muscle?
You know, as you go up in an organization, one of the things you need to think about is what I can accomplish with my peers. But the great thing is you can do that right now, regardless of your role. Because you can, a lot of times we'll say, I have to do this, I have to do that. But if you say, you know, if I work really well with my peers, what can I accomplish? Because a lot of times what you'll see is in organizations, if you don't start on that now, as you go up, it's going to be harder and harder to develop. The least likely place where you'll find high-performing teams is the top of a company.
Yeah.
So I'd say for listeners, think about what could be achieved collectively, but also, you know, if you have that difficult peer that you're working with, it's easy to say they're a jerk. It's easy to say they're difficult. It's harder to say, am I doing something to contribute to the problem? To say, hey, you know, am I being a bad collaborator? Do I share information regularly with them? How do I talk to them in meetings? You know, like one thing I know I'm guilty of is if I'm working with someone who's difficult, I'm very careful with my words. So I'm very quiet and I come off as distant. And then the person will say, I'm not a good collaborator. I'm distant. I wasn't engaged. When in fact, I was very engaged, but I was being very careful with my discussions and what I'm saying. So yeah, people right now can think, how can I collaborate well with my peers? Because that's a skill that you need to work on right now to help you throughout your career.
This is very timely that you said that. And I'm at my real job. I'm working on a council and we're looking at engagement score stuff. And one of the topics or questions is around cross-team collaboration. And I actually said out loud, which I feel really horrible, and I felt bad at the time, was although we can try to make that topic a little bit better, does it matter? Because people, you know, I do my job. I don't need to talk to other people. I will just do mine and go home. And I didn't know how to frame, or how do we frame to other people that the cross-team collaboration actually does matter. It actually does make you better. It actually does have a better outcome. How do you speak to that to let people know it actually does matter, even though you might have a job where you're just scanning the sheets all day for the safety material sheets, but having that cross-team collaboration or that thinking, there's a benefit to it. How do we speak to that?
You know, from a psychological perspective, if you think about what is capable of you working with your cross-department peers, you start to identify things that are bigger than yourselves alone. So from a motivation perspective, you start to identify these things that are not just you, it's everyone contributing. And wow, could this be impressive? Could this have a huge impact? That's actually one of the things we saw in the book, was when we asked people about these groups that were really productive and achieved incredible things, they focused in on what they could achieve and they identified something bigger than themselves. The other piece is from a leadership perspective. If they are not playing nice in the sandbox, you know what happens. If the head of operations and the head of commercial do not get along, and they do not like each other, they are inadvertently giving permission for their entire organizations to not work with each other.
And the
And that-
silos and the walls and the
Exactly. And, I think companies that have internal competition as a driver of performance are missing out on the opportunity. And the reason I say that is your competition is not internal, it is external. So if you have regions competing against each other, instead of saying, hey, Western region, I'm in the Eastern region, can we learn from each other and help each other to be better? I'm now trying to outdo them, and I'm not going to share anything with them. So you're inadvertently creating silos, and I would argue you're also encouraging mediocrity.